Yo, what is up, gang? I'm here with another banger. In all seriousness, I've teased this a bunch. I know I have. I've been really burned out on Overwatch, and let's just say I've got a little, oh, that's the wrong thing. I've got a little something coming up that's gonna be a pretty interesting video. But that being said, this is kind of the last Overwatch video I was planning on making, unless of course this went a direction that I would like. So that being said, I'm just gonna read over this article. I'm also just going to tell you right now, I'm skipping over pretty much the entire beginning part. I'll read it after the TLDR part, essentially, because I don't want you to suffer through me reading through a million years of history. So this is all set up. We'll read that in a second. I think that there's blah, 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 blah. Okay. So where do we go from here? At the end of the day, we want to make a game that players want to play. Because of the challenges mentioned previously, we are focused on making 5v5 the best experience it can be. However, because we operate as a service to our players, we always remain open-minded to reevaluating our decisions based on your actions and feedback to give you the best game experience we can. Rather than introduce a disruptive permanent change to the game, we'd prefer to explore the space further and make changes based on that exploration. With that being said, we're looking at running a series of events to try out as different core team composition formats in Overwatch 2. The community has just once or twice suggested a test. Why not put various forms of 6v6 in the game in order to gauge the results? We agree, and based on that feedback, we're exploring how we can test different forms of 6v6 in the game to gauge the results. This is taking some time, however, for reasons that may not be readily apparent. So I do just want to go over this first because it's obviously a big drop. They are going to be doing 6v6 tests, it seems like. That sounds really good. I have always said that I found it very, very weird that they weren't even willing to test it, because I just didn't even see the harm in it. Where's the harm in having a week or two test of 6v6? I literally don't see the harm unless they were just scared that a bunch of people were going to enjoy it and they were going to have to change the game a bunch. But that doesn't seem like why they did it. They go on to explain it here. I'm not going to lie, I really don't like this next paragraph, so I'm going to wait a second to talk about it. I'll just say it right now. I am a bit of a 6v6er. I'm not life or death on this because it's at the end of the day, it's a video game, but I've always preferred 6v6. I have almost 1,500 hours on Overwatch 1. I have 300 on Overwatch 2. Obviously, Overwatch 1 had been out for a lot longer, but that should tell you something. I'm not a huge fan of the 5v5 format. I think it really destroyed the tank role just entirely, which I get is not important for pretty much anyone else other than tank players, but I think it objectively just makes tank terrible. And I think that's gonna shoot them in the foot, to be honest. I think it's gonna be a slow death of them slowly bleeding out because of the lack of tank players. Now that's not to say I don't think 5v5 can work. I actually do think there's a way that 5v5 could be made to work. And that's balanced open queue, which I will not lie, they do talk about it a little bit. But let's keep going. The first and honestly largest reason we need to do this in a way that allows the game to have optimized technical performance. I'm referring to frame rate and memory constraints with 12 players in a match. I hate this. I get why they're saying it, but I hate it because Overwatch 1, how is it possible that Overwatch 1 that came out 8 years ago now was able to run 6v6? But Overwatch 2, its engine, is somehow worse and is not able to run with 12 players on the game. And they do say later on, they've been quite a few upgrades and additions to Overwatch 2 that have an impact on the performance of the game. These range from new features like allied outlines and enabling healer vision by default. This, I'm not gonna lie, they needed to change this because this is what makes it rough. The addition of more technically demanding hero kits. I don't really understand this. What exactly is more demanding? I guess maybe things like Lifeweaver and a lot of characters put a lot of stuff on the screen. But also I feel like there was a lot of characters in Overwatch 1 that did that as well. We had 50 characters with shields. I'm not a game dev. I mean, I've coded a few basic games, but that doesn't seem right. And honestly, it kind of comes off as their engine somehow got worse, which I kind of don't doubt because I don't think it got worse. I think they just have a lot of stuff in there that's built in that just wasn't used because the PvE just never came out. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. As well as visual upgrades to the UI, maps, and heroes. This is another thing I disagree with. I don't think a single like upgrade they've made is really that noticeable. Like the UI, I think it, like objectively looks worse a lot of the time. The heroes and map, like the new looks of the heroes, I don't really think that would make it look too, like it's not like any of the characters have like some crazy difference from Overwatch 1. And then maps, this is the other thing. I just don't think, like I was trying to think about it. Maybe I just remember Overwatch 1 looking better than it did. But I don't think Overwatch 2 looks like significantly better. I think it kind of, in like certain situations, looks a little bit better, but it's like very rare. I don't think it looks better overall, really, honestly. In a 6v6 setting, these upgrades can have significant impacts for our players, causing the game to underperform on older systems. This is something that I'm just getting so tired of. I'm so tired that all these games keep getting held back by older systems. Like I get, as somebody who literally played on like a toaster PC and the PS4 when I first started playing, I do get that you always want to make sure that people can play like on a system like that. But also the game has been out for 8 years. And I think the big one is probably the Switch. I think the Switch is really holding things back, because as somebody who did play on the PS4 on Overwatch 1, unless it got like significantly worse frame rates, I don't think the PS4 or the Xbox would be that much worse. But I guess if somebody has one of those and plays on it, let me know in the comments. Overwatch is a fast-paced game. Maintaining the game that runs smoothly across all our platforms is important to the player's experience. This, I will say, I do get it, because like obviously you're not going to be like, sorry, Switch players, you guys aren't going to be able to play. But then also, once again, Fortnite was the biggest game in the entire world, and it had a mobile edition, and they straight up were just like, well, our mobile edition, we're not allowed to update it, so you guys are just going to be stuck in this older version. If they were just said that with Overwatch 2, I don't think there's that many Switch players that would like rebel. But I guess if it is a problem with PS4 and Xbox One or whatever, yeah, I get it. Well, limited time tests could arrive sooner. The team is still investigating exactly how long it would take to permanently increase performance across the game. This would be a large effort that would most likely take at least several seasons to accomplish. I will say one thing. This is the part that's making, like, I get it, but it is super concerning to me, because I don't want to sound like a doomer, but I genuinely don't see the game surviving like 7 more seasons or whatever, like with a large player base, if it stays how it is. They do mention that they're going to try other things as well, but if I'm quitting the game, you have a big problem, because I'm like the edge of the casual player, where I'm definitely a little more into it than like most casual players, but honestly, I have kind of become a casual player, and even I hate it right now. I think you might keep DPS in sports, but I don't think tank players are going to stay too much longer. They've been through enough. But who am I to say that? I don't know. Another issue, one that gives me anxiety about opening this Pandora's box, is what to do with queue times if players prefer 6v6 to keep in some form of it around. I don't like this as wording either, because keeping, like, if you have 6v6 and 5v5 in the game at the same time, I don't think a single tank player will be queuing up for 5v5. There'll be like 4 players who would rather play that. And then no one else is going to want to play 6v6. Well, okay, not no one else. There'll be like the small amount of people who want to play 6v6 in the other 2 roles. And 5v5 will just get butchered, I think, for the time. But I don't know, maybe it would work. I don't know. The team was not able to solve this issue previously. While we have some ideas now, there's no guarantee they would work. Is there a world in which people are willing to live with longer queue times to play this format? My thing is, I'd be willing to wait. Like, my limit is like 4 or 5 minutes. Like, I think if it's longer than 4 or 5 minutes, that's when you're getting to a point where it's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. I know a lot of people are gonna be like, if you'd wait 4 or 5 minutes for 66, yeah. It's just more fun. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I just have a lot more fun. We also have tens of millions of new players that have only played 5v5. We want to be openly mindful not to frustrate those who like the game as it is today. I really do think most of those players, though, if they went back and played 6v6, I think they would have a fun time. Like, I don't think anyone would be super pissed. I think there'd be some people who are like, yeah, I preferred it the other way, obviously. And I just don't think it would be nearly as large of a group as 6v6 is, because, like, who is asking for 5v5? Did anyone want one less tank? No, not really. I mean, people wanted better queue times, but they didn't want one less tank. And I don't think there's that many people who are like, 5v5 is so much better. They just like a lot of the things that Overwatch 2 does. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some 5v5ers will come into the comments here and disagree with me, but it is what it is. But I will fully admit there's a graph here. I'll show you the graph really quick. This graph, it really does hurt 6v6, I will say. We'll talk about that once we're done with all this, though. The outcome of these tests would give us a lot of valuable information to consider moving forward. We'd run the test for a few weeks and gauge interest from the community. Then we'd measure the impact it had on other experiences in Overwatch 2, like 5v5, arcade, etc. Take lessons from his playtest to see what we can learn about the mode and the current ecosystem in the future for Overwatch. We would reflect carefully on the learnings from whatever test we run and explore how to best give players what's being asked for, whether it's a world of 5v5, 6v6, or even both. Don't do both. It's a future for us to outright or figure out. I've always thought, I've said this a lot, that I think they should just add an Overwatch Classic mode that's like 6v6 open queue madness with maybe even 2 CP in it, and just literally call it Overwatch Classic, and it replaces open queue or whatever, and it would just be the kind of chaotic mode. I still think it maybe could work if you would do that, because then if it's open queue 6v6, the queue times would still be like at most like 30 seconds probably, unless the game was hated. The only problem with that was you'd have to balance the two modes entirely differently, and honestly, so far, open queue and roll lock have not done well enough for me to justify that I think that they would be able to balance both. I just don't think they would. I would like it. I think you need to commit to either 5v5 or 6v6, and that part of that is going to be you guys, Overwatch just has to kind of accept that they're going to lose players one way or the other. Because if they fully commit to 5v5, I'm out, personally. Not my game anymore, I don't care. I'm not saying everyone else should leave, I'm not even saying it's bad, it's just for me personally, that would take a lot of the fun out of the game for me. If it's 6v6, any of the big, massive 5v5 fans, they would also probably abandon ship. They'd be like, well, it's not for me anymore. So maybe both would be the best thing, like if they want to keep as many players as possible, but I don't think that should be their priority, to be honest. I think they need to find a niche so they start gaining players. Look at the changes that Overwatch has had to its inception. It's clear that many of those have reduced some of the variety within an Overwatch match. I've been saying this for so long. This game is so boring. There's nothing changes. It all feels the same ever since open queue roll lock got introduced. Yeah, it feels a lot less variety, and I feel like no one can argue with that. It is just less variety-ful. Sure, it's more balanced, but to me personally, I think balance is secondary to fun. I think I'm playing a video game, I want it to be fun. I know most people are gonna be like, well, balance is fun. I entirely disagree with that notion. I think you can have the most unbalanced game of all time. Like, for example, Marvel Rivals is not a very balanced game, but it's super fun. And it's fun because everyone is kind of broken in their own way. And the same thing can be said for a lot of fighting games like Mortal Kombat, like Guilty Gear. Sure, there's those broken characters that at the very top rank are like the only pickable characters. But for most people in those games, they can pick whoever and they can make it work, which is the beauty of it. Overwatch does not have that right now. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I played Reinhardt for like 5 seasons and he was just absolutely terrible. Like, actually terrible in any rank above Diamond. He was awful. I think he's better now, but I don't care. We get feedback from some players that Overwatch can feel the same from game to game. It does. While much of this gets attributed to 5v5, we feel there's more in play. I will say, I do think part of it is 6v6 though, and there's just no denying that. Because 6v6, two tanks would make the game significantly different. With 5v5, there's only wait, actually, I could do the math probably. Oh my god, I'm not doing this math actually. Fuck that, never mind, my brain is not compatible with that right now. I think it's just objectively true though that if you have an extra tank, there's more variety in the matches. Because like, for example, you get a Reinhardt, you could also get a Wrecking Ball. There's also another game where you get a Reinhardt and you get a Zarya. There's another game where you get a Reinhardt and you get a Roadhog. There's another game where you get a Wrecking Ball and a Winston. It's like there's way more options just in general, I think, objectively. So I do think it is objectively 6v6 would have more, but I do agree that there's more at play here. Specifically, another thing I've been arguing for, which is balanced open queue. Like, I know a lot of people are going to say that's crazy, but it is possible. Like, I think you could make soft roll locks that would work for it. I think you could even just balance open queue, and I think it would be fun. Besides running experience with 66, we'd like to re-examine some of the ways we tried solving previous problems, specifically with the goal of bringing some freedom back to an Overwatch match without the severity of issues that accompanied it. This is huge for me because I've always been complaining about this. For instance, we think that there could be other ways of putting a team together that aren't quite as rigid as set composition, but not quite as loose as open queue. We'll be running at least one quick play hack based on this idea in Season 13. There's some gotchas to this direction, but after reading 400 pages of this blog, I hope you'll all be able to see that there are trade-offs to many of the decisions that go into this game, and into any game, really. I agree. I'm a big 6v6er. Maybe not big, but I'm like a medium 6v6er. I actually would much rather prefer them go back and change something like roll lock, because I think that's where this problem originates, honestly. I don't think it's 5v5, I don't think it's 6v6, I think it's something like roll lock, which makes it so... Because, for example, for me personally, one of my favorite things about Overwatch 2 is or Overwatch 1, is when I'd play with my friends, I'd be having a bad game as like the healer, for example, and I could just be like, hey, anyone want to swap with me and I'll just play a different role and someone else take over my job? That would happen, and it would make the games feel better. To wrap it up for now, your feedback has driven both our inspiration and commitment to testing new ideas in game. We're super thoughtful about how we implement new ideas to the live game, because there are a million players who want to jump in Overwatch every season, and we want anything we put in game to benefit the community as a whole. Ultimately, Overwatch team wants to continue building the game that you want to play season after season. This blog, or thesis rather, is just the start of this conversation. This isn't the last time we'll be getting into 5v5 or 6v6, and we can't wait to share more with you on our plans in the future. In closing, we appreciate you so much, and we love seeing your passion and dedication of the game, Team 4, and the Overwatch community. Team hears you, we see you, and we're incredibly thankful to be on this ride with all of you. Can't wait to share more in the upcoming months, and let's make a great game together. Aaron Kelly. So I want to get the few bad things I have to say out of the way immediately, okay? My first thing, why did it take this long to answer it? Like, I don't need like a specific answer. And I know they said that it had something to do with the technical limits, but even still, like, I would have much preferred 6 months ago if they just said, we're not going to talk about it for a while because we're having technical difficulties with even trying to implement it. I would have been like, okay, I'll shut up then. I'll wait for however long, like a year, and then I'll bring it up again if they still haven't talked about it. But I would have shut up, and I think a lot of other 6v6ers would have shut up if we just got something. But the problem was what they decided to do was radio silence and outright deny speaking on it, which I do get not wanting an interview on it, because like obviously if you're getting talked a lot about that, your words are going to get misconstrued, and you're not going to have like a fully written out big paragraph big essay like this. You wouldn't have that. So I do get waiting. I just wish they give us something, because to be honest with you, a lot of the 6v6 community has been, sure, a lot of them are assholes, but we've been completely villainized by like most of the content creators in this game, to be honest. And that they treat a lot of 6v6ers like we're some fucking cult who hates the game and we just want it to be our way. When I think a lot of 6v6ers, the only reason they were so vocal is because we didn't get shit. Like, we didn't... Imagine if you had been spending the entire... Like, imagine everyone was... You know how everyone was complaining about Heroes being in the Battle Pass? Imagine if we just kept complaining for a year and they didn't say a thing. They didn't say we were considering changing it. They didn't say that there's problems with it. They didn't acknowledge that it is an issue. They just were radio silent on it. People would be pissed. People would be super pissed. There'd be people just like now in 6v6 who would be literally making it their entire personality to just hate that. And I think that was a terrible decision from them, to be honest with you. I still don't get it. Maybe I'm wrong and that is a fair reason, the technical stuff, but I disagree entirely on how they've handled it. But the only other bad thing I really have to say here is I really don't like this technical paragraph. I get where they're coming from, but it just sounds bad. Like, this is going to be taken in such a bad way by most of anyone who isn't like a hardcore Overwatch fan. They're going to read this and they're going to be like, so the performance got worse than it did in Overwatch 1. Because to be honest, look at me in the eyes. Does Overwatch 2 look significantly better than Overwatch 1? No. Does it even look minorly better than Overwatch 1? Still no, in my opinion. I don't think anything really looks significantly better. I think it looked pretty damn good back then. It looks pretty damn good now. Didn't really change. And I think people are going to see that and they're going to be like, look at this. There's no difference between these two maps, for example, or little to no difference, but somehow they can't run 6v6. As well as the other big thing, I've played 6v6 customs in Overwatch 2. There's definitely been some jank, but it's not like a bunch. Like I feel like that jank wasn't really that bad. Like if it was so bad that it was making it so you wouldn't even talk about it, I would think that it wouldn't even be possible in the workshop, but it is. And that's the thing that pisses me off kind of about this paragraph. And I really do think it's going to come back to hurt them, this paragraph specifically. Maybe not. Maybe I'm the fucking douchebag who's saying that the engine got worse or whatever. But honestly, to me, that's what it reads like. It reads like their engine is full of a bunch of kind of useless stuff, like the time of day swapping and the weather that was going to be in the game and all this other stuff for the PvE that's no longer there. And it's worse optimized because of it, and likely because of Activision Blizzard putting them on a really tight schedule. And now I am going to, so that's my base. Oh wait, I want to say the good things though. I'm glad that they are addressing it finally. I will give them that. It needed to happen, but I'm glad it's happening. I also actually do like the way he came at it, because I was really expecting a very, how do I say it? A very opinionated, I guess, way of looking at it, where they would kind of just be like, we like 5v5 better. Shut your mouths, queue times. Like I was expecting that. But he did actually come at this from a very balanced point of view, I feel, and he even said, yeah, there's aspects of 6v6 that were better than 5v5. There are. He would also say that both of them have problems, which is also true. I'm really glad he came at it from that perspective, because I will say, if he had come at this in an opinionated way, like super hard, I think he would have gotten lots of hate from either side, really. And now we're going to go into this part. I'm going to skim over a lot of this, I'm not going to lie, because it is a lot of just history about the game, which I don't really want to repeat, to be honest. Like, for example, like this. There have been 3 large format changes to Overwatch, and the first happened shortly after game launch. This was hero limits. I'm not going to read about hero limits. This was always a silly thing. It was kind of fun, but I don't even think it was fun, to be honest. I think hero limits was just actually dumb, or no hero limits was just actually dumb, because you just get 5 Winstons, or you get like, not 5 Winstons, you'd get like 6 Winstons, and then you'd get, like some games you'd have like 3 Mercies and a fucking 3 Reinhardts or something. It's like, sure, it's silly, but it kind of loses its novelty after like the first 4 games, and then everyone just starts playing the same DPS, and it's like, okay. So I'm not going to read about that really, because honestly, I think that was just a very, it was just like not even fun. It wasn't balanced. It was neither. The second change, which this is the big one for me, was the game's format moved from open queue to role queue, which limited team compositions to the 2 hero from each role. Before role queue, there was no enforced 2-2-2 composition, and players had the freedom to select any role they liked once they were loaded into a match. And they could swap freely in the match, by the way, between all 3. With open queue, teams had a lot of freedom of choice about what heroes and team compositions to play, but there were quite a few problems that role queue intended to address. Like I've said in the past, I actually don't like role queue, because I think it adds a whole limitation to how you can play the game. Because, for example, for me, one of the most fun parts about both Marvel Rivals and Overwatch 1 was with open queue, was when I would play with my friend. I get that not everyone had this, and I really do, like, I played solo Q2, guys. I remember the games of 5 fucking DPS and 1 tank. I do. But I also think those games where you would play with your friends, like even if it was just 3 of you or whatever, you could kind of form a team comp just based on what you wanted to do. And it could be crazy shit. I remember one of my favorite competitive games I ever played, of any game ever, period, was a Eichenwald game. Game where I had 6 friends playing. 5 of them played healers, and I just played Reinhardt. And it was so fucking fun because I was an absolute monster. I was getting speed boosted. I was getting damage boosted. I was getting nanos. I was getting all of it. It was fucking crazy. Super, super fun. Was it balanced? Hell no. No chance was that balanced. But damn, it was really fun. And that is the same thing happening in Marvel Rivals right now. I've been playing a lot with my brother. And even just the two of us, we can still play and make these comps that are like super dive comps or something like that. When I've been playing with more people in Marvel Rivals, we make a crazy team comp like a super bunker comp that just shield, double shield type stuff. So I am very glad they're at least talking about changing this, because that's been one of my biggest problems, honestly, since Overwatch 1 introduced that. Prior to the blah blah, damage was in fact by far and still is today the most popular role, and this tank was by far the least popular. Fair. In fact, seeing matches with 5 or even 6 damage players on a team was not uncommon. I do remember that. The role imbalance led to wildly imbalanced matches between teams. This I will fully give you. It's not balanced. Like I said, you're not going to have balance with open queue, but also I am gonna make a full video on this topic at a different time, because I am starting to actually, it's pissing me off to a point where I feel like someone needs to say it. Games nowadays are getting so competitive. Everyone wants to be super balanced. Everything needs to be perfectly like even. I should have the same amount of chances of winning as you. You should have the same amount of chances of winning as me. I hate that. I've always been the person to say that I think games are meant for fun. They just are. Like, I want the game to be fun. I don't care if it's balanced. I don't care if it's unbalanced. I know a lot of people, once again, are going to say that balanced equals fun. I entirely disagree with that. I think you can have a super unbalanced game that's super fun. I think you can have a super balanced game that's super unfun. For example, I think Valorant is pretty balanced most of the time. I think it's just super unfun. It's just not a fun game. Like, it's just not. And then, moving the role queue solved a lot of these problems and made additional benefits to the game as well. Matchmaking was based on skill within a given role, not just skill overall. Some players had wildly different skill ratings per role, so the ability to matchmake on set roles provides a big measurable boost in match quality. I actually agree with this, but I will say there's another trade-off to this, where you'll get players like me, who I'm top 500 tank player. Well, I guess I was. I'm not like that anymore now. I'm probably washed and back in diamond or something. But for example, I was a top 500 tank player. And then on support, I think I was always like masters, because I just didn't like playing support very much. But when I did, I would pretty consistently win. And then DPS, I'm ass at DPS. I'm absolutely trash. And I found this again in Marvel Rivals. When I tried to play DPS, bro, I just get clapped. I just do. I'm not a good DPS gamer. Is it my aim sucks? Yeah, probably. But I just think that is a better way of measuring, sure. But then once again, you'll get players like who are top 500 tanker, for example, and they look at your profile, they're like, wow, you're a pretty good player. And then they see me playing DPS and they're like, wow, you must be boosted. Not a big thing, but it is still there. Switch to a role queue system did have downsides, the largest of which was longer queue times. And yeah, this is the big thing for me. I honestly think this is the big part, other than just the fun of it, is the queue times are so much better. I remember even in the dead zones of Overwatch 1 before role lock, you would still get games within like 20 seconds. And even in the dead zones of Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2, open queue, the longest queue times you'll ever get are like a minute, maybe 2 minutes if you're really unlucky. I was top 500, so I know how high those fucking queue times got. And I think I still, well, no, I'm not this season, but last season I was still top 500 in open queue. And that always just has good queue times. And for me, that's big. Team tried to address this imbalance, speaking of the ratio of players queuing for each role. The priority pass system, which this was just I'm not gonna lie, it was just not a good system. It just wasn't, because it just rewarded people to play tank and just played like absolute buffoons and then queue a different role with the role they actually wanted. We introduced systems to reward players for playing tank, eventually giving them a loot box and a bunch of XP for queuing the role. I still just don't think this was enough. What you needed to do, if you wanted people to play tank, you need to make fun tanks. Don't make Sigma, don't make Orisa, Don't make fucking all these other boring ass. Let's look at actually what all Overwatch added characters, because I'm pretty sure 90% of the tanks they added are just not fun. Like, that's the best way to just see it. Okay, so we got Orisa. In my opinion, the most boring character in this entire game, just all around. She's always been the most boring. Then we got Doomfist, who was a DPS back then, actually, so we didn't get Doomfist. And we got Ball. Ball was different. I do remember tank queues got slightly longer when Ball got added, but that's one fun tank so far. Then they added Sigma. Sigma is a really good character, don't get me wrong, but he's boring. He just is. I think there's some people who like Sigma, but I think most people agree that he's just not a fun character. And that was it. That was all Tank got, which out of the 3 characters that Tank ever got, I would say 2 of them were genuinely boring, and 1 of them is a very specialized character. If you wanted more people to play Tank, add people like Junker Queen, add characters like Ramatra, like add characters like that. Don't add fucking Mauga like characters or Orisa or Sigma. And I know it's easy to say, just don't add this, but like genuinely, that was the problem. I don't think the problem was ever that nobody wants to play Tank. I think there would have been people who wanted to play Tank, and you could have like allure players that are DPS players to wanting to play Tank with characters like Junker Queen, but they just didn't. They just added boring tanks. But I will still say, I think Tank would have always had the lowest like amount of players. But giving someone a loot box and a bunch of XP was not enough, and neither was the priority pass. There were additional drawbacks to role queue, as I mentioned, blah, 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 player freedom, so player freedom being gone was really, really unfortunate, but sometimes consistency can start to feel samey. There were some pretty exciting metas in the pre-role lock world, and swapping off a hero to a different role mid-ratch was a much bigger change and more exciting than swapping to one of the same role. I actually completely agree. I think part of the fun of a team shooter is being able to make those busted ass team comps, and that's just kind of gone with 5v5 role lock. It's far, that's what I want to come off saying kind of at the end of this video. The moral of it, I really think that Overwatch 2, if they could keep it in 5v5, they can keep it in role lock, but one of them needs to go. One of them, because it's too limited. It's far, far, far too limited. And especially with the counter swap game and all that going on as well, it's so limiting. It feels like you can play like 2 characters on Tank, for example, or if it is actually balanced, then you just play the counter swap game, which no one wants to do. Third major format change was they swapped to 5v5. When we launched Overwatch 2, we talked about greater individual agency that players could have in 5v5. Overwatch team sport requires players to I'm struggling for some reason, to rely on each other to be successful. This was the case previously, and the game could be frustrating if your team was out of sync. Many times, fighting 6v6 couldn't resolve until ultimate abilities came online. Correct that until ultimate combos would be executed to break through 2 tanks worth of mitigation, supported by high uncontested healing output. Once again, though, I hate this argument. 2 tanks of mitigation, that would never have happened if you guys didn't add fucking Sigma and Orisa. Like, if you had Reinhardt and Winston, that mitigation was never that strong. Even if you only had one of those 2, even if you only had Orisa, I still don't think it would have been that bad. I think what made it so fucking bad was you added 2 characters who were both super sustained tank, like mitigate damage characters who could do it all. And then you also added a bunch of insane healers like Bap and Brig and all these other insane fucking healing things that would just keep you alive for a million years. So I disagree kind of that it was 2 tanks of mitigation. I think if you play, like, go play the 66 thing right now. Anyone watching, the 66 code, I'm sure you can find it. Just go to fucking Samito. I'm sure he's probably saying it constantly, or look it up on Reddit, or look it up literally anywhere. Maybe I'll even put it in the description if I'm feeling real up to it. But just go play it. I don't think it feels that bad. Like, I think honestly, at certain times, Overwatch 2 feels worse because, like, for example, the Orisa meta, oh my god, it felt like nothing ever died. The Mauga meta, the exact same way. Overwatch 2 also has a greater emphasis on FPS gameplay. There's less damage and mitigation and CC. and players get to shoot enemies a lot more. Crowd control could take players out of the game. This is the other thing about the like 6v6 would be suck because tanks, blah blah blah. And like there's not enough players who would play tank in 6v6. I think a really big factor that made people not want to play tank ever in this game is just how much crowd control there was. It felt like you would move like 10 meters and you'd get stunned. You move another 5 meters, you get stunned again. And then you get stunned in that stun, so you get stunned for longer. That doesn't really happen as often in Overwatch 2, so I do think you would see a minor improvement. Damage heroes often complain that the role is the least impactful relative to the strength of super powerful tank synergies and support heroes undoing their playmaking. I think something that would have helped with this would have been the DPS passive. This is a hot take apparently, because I said it in someone's Twitch chat earlier and I was getting flamed by pretty much everybody. But I actually think the DPS passive in Overwatch 1 would have solved a lot of this. Not all of it. Maybe not even solved. Solved is the wrong word. It would have helped a lot of it. Because part of the big problem was DPS would just lay 1,000,000 bullets into a tank, for example. And then a fucking Baptiste in the backline would just shoot him like 3 times and he was full health already. And it's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do about that? But with the DPS passive, they get healed less, which means you can actually still kill them. I actually think that would have worked. I think it's important to keep that in mind. Support heroes also had to focus entirely exclusively on healing since there were bigger team health pools and more oncoming damage on the field with an additional tank player. While I somewhat do agree, I also think that we're kind of in a spot right now in Overwatch 2 where it feels like you have to heal a bot a lot of the time because tanks are so fucking strong right now. You're kind of just stuck healing the tank a lot. Tank synergy wasn't always fun. It slowed the game down, stabilized it, but sometimes it just absolutely ground it to a halt. People point to a double shield meta as an example of this. It wasn't just about double shields though. The ability to stack a very defense heavy lineup, especially in game modes that required a team to push through a small choke, caused a lot of matches to feel like there was no progress at all. I'm glad that he didn't try and cop out and say that double shield was bad, because it was never about the double shields. It was always about, well, okay, it was partially about the double shields, but it was always about the fact that there was 2 more characters, or even 3 sometimes, that would make it even harder to get through still, because even if you get through both those shields, these 2 healers are just going to keep them up, and that one DPS, for example, could be like Mei and just wall it off, and it's like, okay, great, we did nothing. Lastly, one of the biggest benefits of, 6v6 can have its moments. It's hard to follow. Tracking 9 other players is easier than 11, true. Less visual effects on the screen, especially during big team fights. Overwatch is a pretty demanding game, and moving it to 5v5 made it a bit more cognitively manageable. I personally don't like this at all, because I think if you make a game like more simplified, you kick out a lot of the players who loved it for its complexity, and introduce a lot of players who aren't going to stay for long. It's just the way it is. Lastly, one of the big benefits of 5v5 is drastically reduced queue times. They also say that, at some point in here, but 6v6 has super high highs and super low lows, and I agree completely. Chart shows ranked play queue times per role after the introduction of role queue to Overwatch in 2019. So I will fully give you this graph. This does a lot of damage to 6v6. It is bad. It is really, really bad. So back in Overwatch 1, 6v6 post roll queue, this is average time in minutes for a queue time. It was 7.6 minutes for DPS. That's terrible. Like I said, in my opinion, anything above 4 or 5 is getting to a point where it's like, okay, this is bad. So it goes all the way down to 2.9 from Overwatch 2's lifetime. Then we have support, which was at 2.8 minutes, which went down to 1.4 in Overwatch 2. Then we got tank, which went from 1.8 to 1.3, which is a very minuscule change. Obviously, this is made because a lot of players play damage, and if everyone's playing damage and they're waiting long queue times, yeah, that's really bad. So it's rough. And I do admit that I've always said this. I think queue times is the most valid argument out of all of it for anti-6v6. If you want 5v5, the best argument you should be using is queue times. Because to be fair, waiting 7 minutes to play a game is terrible. Especially, I can't even imagine 7 minutes in Overwatch 2, bro. If I queued up for 8 minutes and I got a fucking push, I would actually never play the game again. Genuinely. I'm gonna skip over the rest of this though, because it's a lot of just like explaining. This game started with 6 players on each team. I discussed why we moved away from 6 It doesn't mean it doesn't have any merit. There are moments of madness that could happen with 12 players in a match that just don't quite coalesce as when there are 10. It's almost too much to keep track of. Correction, it was too much to keep track of at times, but that was part of the charm. I completely agree. I think part of the fun of Marvel Rivals is how chaotic it is. It's just actual mayhem, and I think that's great. Part of that chaos allowed players to feel less player or pressure in the match. Another thing I feel, I queue up for Venom in Marvel Rivals, and sure, he's a bit broken, so he's kind of a bad example, but I just queue up for whoever I want in Marvel Rivals. If I'm playing like absolute shit, I don't feel too bad, because I'm learning, and well, yeah, part of it is that it just came out, so I know I'm learning. But also, you just don't feel as pressured, even in competitive. You just don't. Because you know there's 5 other people, so it's like someone else could be having a bad game too, that I can be like, okay, both of us are having a rough time. Or you can have your team kind of carry you. There was an extra player to pick up a bit of the slack from someone who was performing poorly, and since that player was a tank, they had quite a bit of impact. We went over some of the issues of tank synergy earlier, but having 2 of them allowed for one to focus on protecting their backline while the other held ground or pushed into the enemy team. This is big to me because that's the big problem right now with Overwatch 2 tank. It's like you're supposed to be in 2 spots at the same time, which is just not, you can't do that. You literally just can't. And the tank role had a lot of depth in understanding how to work with the other tank on the team. This part of its mastery curve took a long time to learn, and for a small group of players devoted to it, it was part of the allure. That was me. I loved learning the fucking intricacies of this tank and this tank work really well, and if I had a Roadhog, I'd have to work around it and figure out the best way of playing with him. I thought it was part of the charm of tank, and I do think that's gone now. Not to mention, you also literally just can't play with like your friend if you used to duo queue and play tank together. We mentioned the difficulty of balancing tanks for 6v6 earlier, but in the past year and a half has shown us that there are issues balancing tanks for 5v5 as well. For much of Overwatch 2, tanks have been fairly balanced. I hate this. They've been fairly balanced, sure, but they're not fun. Not a single tank has been fun, really, until this most recent patch, and even then, I think it's just because they're broken. But when one of them becomes a powerful outlier like Mauga, it can be felt strongly in the world of one tank. I also just think tank just doesn't feel as good. I'll say it right now, I think tank is harder to balance in 5v5, to be honest with you. Because you have to make it so every tank is perfectly viable against each other, which is damn near impossible. Because like, how the fuck are you ever going to make Orisa Reinhardt a fair and fun matchup? You just won't. You just won't. So yeah, that's this entire fucking... Well, okay, I didn't read it all, but that's like the big important parts of this article. I'll definitely leave a link in the description. Tell me what you think for sure. Are you a 5v5er? Are you a 6v6er? Hell, are you a 7v7er like Flats was suggesting? I don't care. Play what you want. Moral of the story, try Marvel Rivals. It's really fun. That's about it.